I know I've been going in a bit on Sam and Emma lately, but these Democrats are just, I can't take it. They call themselves left and call themselves progressives, but they're pushing right-wing Democrats. It makes absolutely no sense.
I'm concerned a little bit about
I too am
these
concerned.
notions. I've heard you and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez talk about the economic populism. I know that was a part of her pitch in terms of that leadership fight. But on the
This
right, their
can't force the vote.
vision is basically populism reinforcing existing hierarchies and for powerful people, it's a racialized vision. And the contrast with the Democrats, I just don't think has been there. And within the context of immigration, we just left a complete vacuum for them to dominate the discourse there. But when I hear you or AOC say economic populism being the future for the Democrats versus, I don't know, Chris Murphy or other members of the party, what does that actually look like? Because it can't just be throwing immigrants under the bus and stopping using pronouns at different, campaign events. It's got to be centered around a concrete vision of, a Green New Deal, immigration reform and a positive vision, Medicare for all, student debt forgiveness, that kind of thing. Like, is there a concrete discussion being had right now within the party
No,
about what that economic populist
they ain't
vision, which is
doing none
very
of
buzzy
that.
right now, like what that really looks like going forward?
Yes, I think there is that discussion, but it needs a lot more conversation. I'll use my state as an example. Washington State was the only state that did not move to the right in this last election. And I'll tell you why. We were the first ones to tie minimum wage to inflation, right? Going
There you
back
go.
several decades. So our wages stayed higher. Now, on top of that, Seattle was the first major city in the country to pass a $15 minimum wage. The state went forward then and raised the minimum wage. So the minimum wage in Washington state is high compared to other states. And yet we have still done well. We are still a good place for business. All of the, naysaying about raising the minimum wage didn't come to pass. But on top of that, we provided paid leave for people through a ballot initiative. We actually extended gun safety legislation. We instituted a change so that seniors can get at-home care, long-term care. We just passed not universal child care, but we have a much more expansive definition of childcare with a vision of universal childcare. And so what's happening is average working people and poor people, while they're still struggling, I'm not saying they're not struggling, they are, while they're still struggling, they have much more sense that Democrats have stood up for them and delivered for them. And so when it came to trying to divide people in Washington state on these divisive issues like immigration or trans kids, people said, nah, you know what? Actually, I think they're working for me. We've taken on corporations. Our former AG, who's now our governor, has taken on corporate concentration and monopoly power. And so I think all of these things are part of what the vision looks like, of what it means to fight. And I do think that corporate concentration, corporate power, the elites owning the party is, those are the things that we are going to have to
Shit,
be
had
very
the
vocal
elites
about
own the
fighting
party.
back against, and really having a strategy for every member and every candidate who's running as a Democrat to be very clear about where they stand and who they stand with and what the vision is that we're going to.
See, we just got to get the few good Democrats to run the Green Party and then fill up the Green Party and go from there. Do all the rights like she was talking about. There's very few and far between the Democrats are going to do that stuff. And it's like there's two, maybe three states. You got Washington, Hawaii, maybe California that's kind of progressive. But other than that, we need the Green Party. The Dems aren't going to do it.
Deliver.
You mentioned, and it's a little tangential, but you said that Washington State was one of the states that, or maybe the only state that didn't move to the right. I mean, is that the way that you perceive what happened in this past election? That there was a move to the right, or was there a
Well, I should have probably
failure?
said Trump to be accurate, because I do think that, and
But the Democrats are so right wing, they're like fake Republicans. If you're going to vote for, don't vote for Republican light, just vote for Republican.
as a previous chair of the Progressive Caucus, we worked a lot with the Freedom Caucus on a number of things, including antitrust, including FISA reform and privacy concerns. There were a number of places where we actually, had strong collaborations. But also, if you look at states that voted for Donald Trump, they also voted, this is to Emma's point about economic populism, they also voted for raising the minimum wage. They voted for paid leave. And so when I think about left and right, it's probably not the best description, and I'll think about it. But
Because Democrats and Republicans are both on the right. People like left-wing policies, and so when you give them issue voting, you get to vote for single issues. They'll vote for the left-wing thing. They'll vote for universal health care. They'll vote for free daycare. They'll vote for legal marijuana. What was the word she just said? But they'll vote for like the stuff for the people. But when it comes to the politicians, they're going to vote for whoever they like the most, or whoever's the most flamboyant, if they're not going to give them any good policies. Like if Republicans and Democrats are doing the same thing or talking the same thing, then they're just going to vote the Republican.
They've voted for people they voted for Trump, but I don't believe that the reasons that they voted for Trump are actually going to come into play. And I think people were less likely to be taken by the anti-immigrant, anti-trans stuff if economically they felt like Democrats were taking care of them. And so we continue to be in Washington State, one of the best states for immigrant rights. We have been really on the forefront of protecting immigrants, protecting trans LGBTQ communities across the board. So nothing's being sacrificed there, but we're not allowing people to divide us on those issues because we're also answering economic needs.
Well, I guess what I was asking, I mean, and fair enough in terms of like, how we sort of perceive the various.
Check this out. I'm going to show you how
what people actually voted for. But as far as I can tell from the data, this was an election less of people who did. I guess statistically speaking, the people who voted for Trump in 2016, or I should say 2020, he got the same share of the vote as he did in 2020. What happened was, at least from what it looks like on the data, and as many people went from Biden to Trump as Trump to Harris, but there was a significant percentage of people who voted, who should have been voting in this election, that didn't.
Correct.
On the Democratic side, as opposed to on the Republican side.
Should have been voting, but didn't. Is he talking about the people? I mean, either like everyone kind of should vote, but like people protest and not vote or hold their vote as a protest, right? So I'm not exactly sure who's.
I mean, is that the broader understanding? I mean, what is the understanding of what happened amongst your Democratic colleagues as to what happened here?
I think there are several threads. And so what you said is something I've been saying for a long time, that we should think about who the real swing voter is. When somebody says swing voter, some pundit on television or some, big consultant, they usually mean the independent or conservative Democrat or independent voter, usually white, usually in suburban or rural parts of the country. Those voters are important. I'm not saying ignore them, but what I think we should do is think about the biggest base of swing voters as being our base that would naturally be a Democratic base if we put effort into and respect towards actually earning their votes. And that is young people. That's a lot of folks of color who feel like the Democratic Party and the Republican Party have left them behind, forgotten them, that the whole system is rigged against them, and that they just want now, at this point, they're so frustrated that they're either going to stay home or they're going to vote for a candidate that they think is at least willing to upend the current system as it is.
Right.
And so that's, in my view, that's a big part of why we lost a lot of votes, because we had a 7-state strategy that did not target every state across the country, only 7 states.
7-state strategy. I got a 50-state strategy for the Green Party. I wasn't going to put it in this description, but I might, but it's in a few other descriptions in some other videos. But yeah, why would you only work on 7 states? They know they got some safe ones, Hawaii, California, Washington. They got some safe states, right? They're not, and then they're not gonna worry about Alabama, Louisiana, because those are safe for the red, right? Go to all states, talk to all people, find out what everybody wants. Like the Democrats are BS. She's even telling you they had a 7-state strategy. How many states are there in the United States? Are there 50 states? That means there's 43 states they didn't mess with. They didn't care about. These are not populous. It's not even, it's like 14% of the United States they talk to. It doesn't make any sense.
We did not try to cater to and listen to and respect our biggest base of swing voters that would naturally be a Democratic base. And I think over decades, we have alienated the working class, going back to NAFTA, going back to a whole set of economic policies that we either embraced or didn't embrace. Thinking minimum wage here, raising the minimum wage when we had the trifecta, things like that, made people question our loyalties, along with taking money from big corporations and big wealthy donors. So I think all of those things are part of what happened, and it's going to take a little bit of time to separate them out and to see what we are willing to do and stand up for as a Democratic Party.
To see what you're willing
And you
to
mentioned
do.
there young people and voters of color. Now, when I first started getting excited about politics was the Obama campaign in
Me
2008.
too.
And really,
Hope
it
and
was
change,
his stance on the
boy.
Iraq War. I did not like that Hillary Clinton had voted for the Iraq War and that Obama was in opposition to it. And when I look at this election, I really wonder if that group of people, young people and voters of color who have experienced maybe American imperialism or like the boot of the state, seeing every day on their feeds, like a child whose brain is falling out of their skull as his father holds him up in Gaza. And Amnesty International now is calling it a genocide.
She said, this lady here said to vote for Kamala Harris. The people that were flinging the brains across Gaza, she said to vote for her. The Democrats were supplying weapons. They maybe took away the 2,000-pound bombs, but so it's crazy. And then Pramila Jayapal, you're in that party, leave. Stand up for something. Or just be a Democrat, and the elites run the party. You just said it yourself, so nothing's going to change.
Genocide. Just that idea of like the economy's not working for me, and this is where our tax dollars are going. I really, is the party reckoning with how the support for this slaughter has potentially damaged the party's brand long term for an entire generation of young people, and also.
But see, it's not just the slaughter; it's social media. They've been doing this since the 40s. They've been killing Gazans and people in the West Bank off and on, up and down. Like it gets higher and lower the death toll, but they just got better weapons now, so it's a bigger death toll, and they got bigger bombs, so they're knocking down more buildings and stuff. But this has been going on since 1947, actually since before that, when they broke up the Ottoman Empire. So
the voters you describe.
My honest answer to you is I don't think that conversation is happening. I really don't. I think it's been frustrating to me as somebody who shares
the party,
and has been really vocal on Gaza. And been targeted for it by some of the big moneyed interests on this issue, many of whom are Republican mega donors, by the way. I think that I agree with you that this was not, by the way, this was not just young people. It was not just folks who are Arab or Muslim or Middle Eastern even. It was Black folks. I mean, I think that we saw a lot of, I was in a lot of communities with Black people talking to leaders of the Black community who were really pushing on this as well. And I do think that there was a real disillusionment with our foreign policy and, specifically on the war in the Middle East. I mean, I think that maybe there was some drop off early on with.
I just put out a foreign policy video right before this one, talking about the U.S. and China's foreign policy, the differences. Check that out. I'll leave leave it in the end video or end clip, whatever you
with
call that, end
some other
screen.
things. But I think that this issue
I always
alone,
forget to say like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, do all that good stuff.
certainly, if you look at key states like Michigan and even Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, there were significant drop-offs from, and I know because I went door to door on this issue specifically, trying to see if there was a way to bring voters in while
Will you
recognizing
please vote for this
the
genocide?
despair that I felt as well. And so
I don't even understand.
I
How you
don't
gonna do that?
feel like this is
Please,
one
please
area
come into the
where
party
I
of
do not
genocide.
yet feel
You gonna
like
go
we
door to
are
door for that?
having a real conversation about the consequences, the moral consequences, the consequences to U.S. leadership in the world, much less the political ramifications of what the United States has done or not done.
And since we're talking about
I'm
foreign
not done.
policy, and I just I know you just only have a couple more
Done.
minutes left, and I do want to get to sort of
not
like the
done.
progressive caucus, but
Progressive caucus. Ha!
what's your quick reaction to Biden naming this naval ship after George Bush? I entered it in this essentially this space
War criminals get
as a
ships named after
function,
them. This is what's
as a
up.
fully formed adult, being older, maybe the oldest person on this call, because of the Iraq War. And, I spent a lot of time talking to the late John Conyers about George Bush and the impeachment and the reformation of George Bush. It just seems to me to be shocking that we see this. And, 4 years ago, there was a movement to tear down Confederate statues because they provided a misinterpretation of history or a specific interpretation of history that, of the lost cause. And we took those down because it is because of the values that it is propagating. What's your reaction to Biden?
Yeah, I also came into kind of my activism with the Iraq War. I mean, I led what was the largest demonstration in Seattle history around the Iraq War. I wasn't a member of Congress at the time, and then I sued George Bush for the deportation of Muslims, Somali Americans, and won. It was a class action lawsuit. We protected over 4,000 Somalis across the country, prevented the Bush administration from deporting them. So I share your concerns, and I think that what is happening is that this is what Trump does. He throws out something so extreme. He is so extreme that all of a sudden, people that came before him, Dick Cheney, George Bush, they all suddenly seem to be reasonable. And I think we have to be very.
I don't know. Dick Cheney and George Bush lied us into a war that lasted over 20 years, something like that. Killed a couple million people, killed many, many American soldiers, PTSD, all that stuff. I think it was like $1.3 trillion or more that we spent on that war. We could have just handed them that money. They'd be our greatest allies. We could have built cities there. We could have done anything. Trump, while a warmonger too, is no better than them, but is no different than them. That they act like Trump is so different is why we're gonna get another Trump. They're like, oh, that guy will be so different than everybody. Michelle Obama and George Bush practically make out when they see each other now. You saw Donald Trump and Obama, Barack Obama, yucking it up, right? They're all buddies. They're all friends. They're all the same people. They're the elite, the upper crust, whatever you want to call it. They don't care about us, and you know it. I don't understand why you guys are pushing a party of the elite. That's not going to do nothing for the populace, the people.
Careful about this.
Just
and
be careful.
I think we have to be clear that while those people may not be as extreme as Trump, this is not a scale we should be using.
Is Trump lying us
on
into
any
wars
level
like that?
to assess both the damage that's been done historically, to cover up the damage that's been done historically, or as sort of our guide for what we want in the future.
All right. Lastly, the Progressive Caucus. I know obviously you don't have the same position, but where do you think the Progressive Caucus should go as a caucus to exert more influence? One of the things that has been bandied about is like actually having a litmus test as to who gets that imprimatur. It would obviously shrink the caucus, but it might make it more dense, potent. Yeah. However, what's your sense of that?
Well, when I came in, as you know, I've been chair for 4 years, sole chair, and then I was co-chair with Mark Bocam for 2 years before that. And I put in place term limits because I actually believe that leadership should change of these caucuses. So I took myself out of the running. Yeah, which is an unusual thing for politicians.
From your mouth to some other people's ears, but go ahead.
I think we should do it as a party. I mean, I really do. But that was the thing I noticed, is that there really wasn't a cohesive utilization of the leveraging of power, the leveraging of votes. And so we passed several years ago a rules reforms package that required members to, in order to be a Progressive Caucus member, you had to be a co-sponsor on 70% of what we call our flagship bills. That's like Medicare for All, Green New Deal, et cetera. With some, again, in all of these things, we have people who are in really tough frontline districts, and that doesn't always work. So we give them a little bit of an out. But essentially, we're like, you got to be with us on the majority of issues. And then we also put in place other requirements for people to attend meetings, because that's where we actually push back on the lobbyists that are at our door. And there used to be like 10 people at a meeting. So you could have experts come in and explain a bill that was before us on privatization of Medicare, for example, through Medicare Advantage. But if no one's there, then they all go sign the industry letter after that. So really big things. But the biggest was probably this: if the Progressive Caucus takes a position on a bill that we expect.
But see, the thing is, the Democrats won't let progressives run, and they always challenge progressives when they're in office, so that there's very little progressives in office, and they don't stay in office long, or they change them up, like Baby Bear, AOC. So we need the Progressive Party. If you're green and you get in there, they're not able to change you, because the party is progressive. The Democrats, the Republicans can say whatever they want, but you're a party for the people, by the people. And that's what you're in there to do. You're not just talking, right? So if we really want a Progressive Caucus in Congress, join the Green Party, get some people to run for the Green Party, be it you, your friends, whoever you think is best to run, go run. We need regular people. It doesn't matter what you do. If you're a plumber, a bartender, a coach, a stay-at-home mom or dad, you can still run. We need regular people in office giving regular people ideas.
Expect members to vote with us 2/3 of the time. And so that was the beginning. It's why on Build Back Better, we were able to hold not just 3 or 4 members, but 60 plus members who were ready to vote no on the infrastructure bill, which is why it never came to the floor, which is the only reason we got Build Back Better. Because please don't forget that the Senate sent us the infrastructure bill with every single Democrat. Every single Senate Democrat voting for the infrastructure bill. And then we started getting all this pressure from people saying, don't pass the infrastructure bill. But that took away a whole ton of leverage already when the Senate just unanimously, all Democrats voted for that thing. And it was left to us. There was no legislation called Build Back Better. There wasn't even language on the table for it. And so we had to say, no, we're going to stick together. But I wanted it to be 2/3 of the caucus, not just 5 or 6 people, because we also needed to win the public narrative on why we were doing this and why childcare and housing were so important. And of course, we never would have gotten the Inflation Reduction Act had we not done that. That was lifted directly from Build Back Better. So I think that there's more to do in terms of leverage. And I think that this gave us a really good kind of beginning for how we do this. But a lot of this is about how you go member to member, how you build the desire, the ability, and the courage to stand up in these difficult moments when the speaker is calling you, when the president is calling you, when everybody and their brother are calling you to get your vote. And you have to explain why you're going to hold and fight for something better. I don't think that the American people expect us to win every fight, but I do think that they want to see us fighting for them and not for the wealthiest, and not giving in for the lowest common denominator too quickly. We should fight for the things that we want and put up a really good fight. And at the end of the day, we may not win every fight, but at least we've identified, and the country was with us, and 99% of the Democratic Party was with us. But two senators who, are no longer there, blocked the whole thing.
Yep.
Well, Representative Pramila Jayapal, Washington 7th.
Pramila Jayapal. All right. Well, she is one of the more progressive Democrats, so she sounds pretty good. She sounds a lot like somebody who might be in the Green Party, and I'm going to try to poach her. I'm going to give her a call one day and say, hey, Ms. Jayapal, you're in the wrong party. If you really mean what you say, you need to come over here. If that's what we need to do, Green Party people, we need to get some of these progressives, maybe AOC, I don't know if she's really progressive or not, but Bernie Sanders, we need to get all these people, see if we can get a few of them to join the Green Party, if not all of them, man, make our party stronger. Marianne Williamson, too. So, yeah, checking out what you call it, the Majority Report again. Like I said, right now it's my little dirty pleasure. For some reason, they keep talking about these Democrats. They can't get off the Democrats, so, I got to keep covering them. We got to inform people. Democrats are not progressives. They are not on the left. They are right-wing liberals and mostly and even conservatives. But you would know this, Sam, Emma, if you paid attention from information from across the spectrum.